Hi everyone, and welcome to Be True, my podcast about the writing I love and the writing I do. I promise I won't rhyme the whole time, but today I will rhyme some. I'm a very hoarse and groggy John Tessitore, and today, William Shakespeare's 129th sonnet, The Expense of Spirit in a Waste of Shame. It's Shakespeare, everyone. Google it. And you can find all of my creative work at johntessitore.com. In the early 2000s, the late great comedian Norm MacDonald appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman. As MacDonald often did on talk shows, he ended up doing an extended bit about pornography. On this particular night, while Letterman howled, he analyzed a Tarantino parody called Pump Friction. It was a particularly good bit and smarter than it sounds. And then he hit Dave with the following, which I'm going to try to do with a little bit of Norm's inflection, despite my hoarse and groggy voice. With those dirty movies, I find they're good for about 15-20 minutes. I'm really interested. And then at one point, all of a sudden, I'm bored, you know? I just lose interest completely. And I feel deeply ashamed. That joke has stayed with me for 20 years. There's nothing worse than explaining a joke, but just to be clear, it's an orgasm joke, told by an adult man as if he were still bewildered by his own orgasm. It's a joke that hits so many human notes: lust, biology, guilt, the distance between our ideal selves and our animal selves. It's about the frenzy before orgasm and the mix of emotions that often follow. Real stuff, all packed into about 3 sentences. But not new stuff, not by any stretch of the imagination, not a new thought, not a new joke, not a new public discussion. MacDonald's joke is, of course, as old as humans. Just consider the Dionysian frenzy of the characters in one of my favorite all-time works of literature, The Bacchae by Euripides, first performed in 405 BCE. A sex and wine-filled frenzy that ends in murder and guilt. And certainly the world did not discover the orgasm in 405 BCE. As I said in last week's episode, we're here, aren't we? So why am I telling MacDonald's joke now? Last week, the great state of Texas inched closer to a law allowing small groups of citizens to ban library books that, quote, offend local community values. When asked if the bill could end up banning Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, because it hints at premarital sex, the bill's idiot sponsor replied, "I'm not advised about Romeo and Juliet." And I thought, great, Mr. Public Servant. If you're going to manufacture yet another wedge issue, because it turns out that political groups advocate book banning with far more regularity than actual parents, if you're going to take on the Bard, let me advise you about the Bard. First, Shakespeare is so deeply rooted in our culture, in world culture, but certainly in English-speaking culture, that we quote him every day to this day in popular phrases, aphorisms, and even particular words without even realizing it. In this way, Shakespeare's like the Bible. So much so that the quote trivia game Shakespeare or the Bible can actually be fun to play. So banning Shakespeare in 2025 is like banning the Beatles. It's too late. We live in his world now. Second, there's very little human experience left out of Shakespeare. For better or worse, he touches it all. Not just premarital sex, but the abuse of power, the manipulation of the public, the greed of business leaders, the destruction of the environment, the mistreatment of immigrants, the enslavement of other humans. It's all there. So my advice to puritanical populists and tin-horn despots is to ban it all if you can. Premarital sex is the least of your Shakespearean problems. Nevertheless, today I'm reading Sonnet 129, just to turn the screw a little tighter, so to speak. Obviously, given this long preamble, it's an orgasm poem, and it cuts close to MacDonald's joke. It was first published in 1609, which means it has survived over 4 centuries of idiots far more thoughtful and intelligent and well-read and dangerous than the idiot legislature of the great state of Texas. We already live in the world it made. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action. And till action, lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight. Past reason hunted, and no sooner had past reason hated as a swallowed bait on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit, and in possession so, had, having, and in quest to have, extreme. A bliss in proof, and proved, a very woe. Before, a joy proposed, behind, a dream. All this the world well knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. If you Google this poem, you may see analyses claiming that this is Shakespeare applying his Christian guilt to the phenomenon of the orgasm. But to quote a Texan, I ain't buying it. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, post-orgasm ambiguities are part of the human experience. Euripides wrote about them in the 5th century BCE, and he was very clearly BC. And then there's the opening line, a great pun on the word waste, into which he has expelled his shame. That's a pretty good joke, too. Waste and waste. No, I think Shakespeare has it both ways with this poem. He expresses the post-orgasm ambiguities, but ends with an assertion. For better or worse, we're all going back for more. And that's exactly why you don't ban books. In this very episode, I've described how the post-orgasm drop has been a subject of human inquiry and discussion and literature for at least 25 centuries. Clearly, we need to talk it over. Each individual has to discover the phenomenon for his or herself, and the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, long before some 2-bit Texas state legislature decided that sex was icky. So, I submit this episode as one more contribution to the literature of the human orgasm, a seemingly inexhaustible topic, because every person comes to grips with it at some point, hint, hint. And why the hell should they be forced to start from scratch after 25 centuries? And so, in the hope that you let the cat out of the bag a few times this week, so to speak, this is John Tessitore concluding another installment of Be True. If you've listened this long, thank you. You can find all of my work at johntessitore.com. But first, check out my long poem from Eyes Stricken, available on my Ko-Fi account, ko-fi.com/John Tessitore. All proceeds go to the American Library Association United Against Book Bans campaign. Special thanks to me for today's theme music, which I call A-Chord. Maybe we'll talk again. And if you enjoyed this little podcast, leave some stars or a review and tell your friends. In the meantime, I gotta feed the dog. All right, Luna, I'm coming.